All right, full screen. All right, just make sure everyone can see. All right, we are going to get going today. Welcome, welcome. I am Elizabeth Inpine from Fuelin. We are going to dive into all things triathlon nutrition today, but specifically some of the top triathlon nutrition mistakes that Scott and I see athletes make a lot. Carbohydrates seems to be, it's either a good word or some kind of like dirty word that everybody hates. So we're going to dive into carbohydrates, why they're important, why you absolutely shouldn't fear them, and how to utilize them in your training and racing. Specifically carb loading around sessions, around racing, how that should be incorporated. And then I'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. But feel free to jump in if and when you have anything, or if you have anything to add, experiences with maybe some of these. I know we've all made these triathlon mistakes at some point in time or another. So not establishing your baselines. This is something that I've seen everyone from beginner triathletes all the way up to a lot of the pros that we work with. I'll never forget one of our pros, awesome athlete. We were talking about carbohydrates and what they had done in a race previously. And we said, about what are you consuming, what scheduling, how frequent. And this athlete said, oh, I'll probably eat some bars, some gels. I really don't know. I've never stopped to write it down. And I thought, oh my gosh, really? You've never stopped to write it down? So the importance of knowing not only what types and kinds and certain products of nutrition that you like, but also knowing how frequently, knowing how many carbohydrates per hour your body can handle, how many you like, in terms of sweat rate, how much are you losing? How much are you replacing? So it's really important to know your body and where you start, and can you train fasted? How long after you eat a big meal can you jump into training? So really knowing your body, and then making sure that you have somewhere to start. The other side of baselines, which Scott and I both try to reinforce with our athletes, is getting blood labs done and knowing exactly where you're at for some of those health and performance parameters. So where are your vitamin D levels at? What about magnesium, sodium, potassium? How are those minerals? What about iron? What about your B vitamins? In terms of overall health, what does your cholesterol look like? Your A1C? Knowing what's going on inside your body is really a key piece of information. We can help and advise all day long, and we've had athletes that say, I'm fueling around sessions, I think, but I just don't feel well. And then they go and get their blood labs done, and we realize that their ferritin levels are very low, or their B12 levels are very low, and it explains why why they have no energy or why they can't train hard. So knowing what's going on inside your body, also knowing what's going on around your training and racing in terms of what you're consuming, all of these things are going to set you up for a successful season ahead, and for just being a successful, healthy, thriving human being, right? You want to know what's going on so that you can make adjustments, treat deficiencies, and make sure that you're going to live a long and healthy life. Another one, not practicing carbohydrate intake. I've seen it, whether it's because athletes don't like carbohydrates, whether it's because they think they're related to body composition. A lot of times athletes will say, well, this session probably doesn't need, air quotes, need carbohydrates. So I'll only practice it during maybe some of the longer, harder sessions. The great and particular thing about your gut is if you're not practicing carbohydrate intake, your body gets less efficient at utilizing those. And it also, your gut is very trainable. And we'll dig into it a little bit, but 90 to 120 grams of carbohydrates an hour is that kind of ideal window for how much you can and potentially should be consuming for peak performance. And if you're not practicing regularly taking in carbohydrates during your training session, come race day, you're not magically going to be able to consume that much. You'll have GI issues. But because the gut is so trainable, you can take 10, 12 weeks, really getting your gut used to fueling with carbohydrates and knowing how, when, frequency, what kinds, so that you can perform. Lack of sweat rate data, the app makes it very, very easy to keep track of all of this, which we'll see at the end. But you should know, are you a heavy sweater, a salty sweater during certain sessions? Do you sweat more than others? What are your race conditions going to be like? We need to make sure that we're preparing you for that. Have you looked, is it going to be a super humid race? Where you guys live, at certain times of the year, it's absolutely ridiculously hot and humid. So especially important when you're training in those conditions to know so that you can replenish, because dehydration isn't just dehydration. It not only affects your performance in the session and your performance in future sessions, but it also really can inhibit your recovery. So if you're constantly living in a state of dehydration, or you're constantly depleting electrolytes in your training and not replenishing them properly for your body, then session after session after session, you're just going to work yourself into a deficit. Another mistake, a single macro focus, whether that's you jumped on the keto bandwagon and you love that, whether you are a high protein athlete, whether you don't eat carbohydrates or do eat carbohydrates, regardless, all of the macronutrients, all of the micronutrients are incredibly important. And there's a place and a time and an amount for all of those. So if diet culture has creeped in, or if you've tried different things or you want to try different things, know that all protein, fat, and carbohydrates, all of those are important and should be utilized in your diet. Now, this one, number 5, not eating enough. I see it all the time. And it's either intentional because athletes are working on body composition, because they genuinely think they need less than they actually do, or it's unintentional. You guys have very busy lives. You have work, you have family, you have training once, twice a day. There's not always time to properly prepare food or to sit down and have 3 solid meals and several snacks during the day. Some athletes don't realize, again, they've miscalculated or don't know how much they should be consuming for performance, for recovery. And not eating enough can lead to low energy availability, which can lead to greater consequences down the line. I have spoken pretty openly about my own time not fueling properly and how that led to a loss of my period, a loss of hair, hormonal imbalances, bone issues. So I had multiple stress fractures. I wasn't sleeping well. And then eventually performance was okay for a while. And then eventually performance wasn't. And so they're not eating enough will absolutely impact you in the short term, but also in the long term. And so it's something that you want to make sure that you're adequately fueling your body for the work required. And then the last one that I would say is where Fuelin is incredibly helpful, but also I think to take there are enough things on race day for you to focus on and worry about. Your race day nutrition shouldn't be one of them. It should be so automatic by the time that you get to race day that you don't even have to think about it. You should know not having a plan is, fail to plan to fail. Not having a race day nutrition plan is absolutely it's incredible to me that athletes will do all this training and spend months with dedication and commitment and knowing, I mean, I'm guilty of this, knowing exactly what you're going to wear on race day and exactly how you're going to get there and the whole schedule and every detail of the course, but not have a race day nutrition plan. Nutrition really is the fourth discipline of triathlon, if you will. And your race nutrition plan, your race day plan, it's what you do in training leading up to the race. So all of it, Scott and I will get athletes about 2 weeks out from the race and they'll ask us, okay, what's my nutrition plan? And we will tell them, well, exactly what you've been doing for the last 10 to 12 weeks in those longer brick sessions, right? So practicing starting that early and really dialing in exactly what you're going to consume, when you're going to consume it, how you're going to carry it, what happens if you lose a bottle, or what happens if you lose a bar or some gels? What are you going to put in special needs in case? So all of these components coming in, trust me, it's great to have a plan and not have to worry about your race nutrition. All right, when you're looking at training before, during, and after, so what does fueling for triathlon look like in general? Dividing it up, before sessions, the idea is to top off glycogen and help your body prepare for that session ahead. At Fuelin, we have a traffic light system to kind of help make it easy for our athletes to understand red, yellow, and green. So red snacks or meals are lower in carbohydrates, around 30 grams, yellow or moderate, around 50 grams, and then green or higher carbohydrates, around 100 or so. So when you're looking at your session, what kind of a session is it? How long is it going to last? And how intense is it going to be? So if you are kind of looking from left to right, if the session is less than 60 minutes, any kind of intensity, any kind of session, you could do the session fasted, potentially, if that's part of your training plan, if that's part of the nutrition plan that we worked out. You could have a banana, maybe a slice of toast with almond butter and jelly. But unless it's been, if you're coming off of, maybe if you had dinner the night before, like an early dinner at 6 p.m. and your training session is 7 a.m., probably a good idea to have a snack in there. But if it's, if you had lunch and your session is at 4, you may, and it's less than 60 minutes, you probably won't need that big of a snack. If it's an hour to 2 hours, basically, of either a swim, a bike, or a run, and that intensity is maybe a zone 1, 2, so really a chill intensity, some kind of snack or meal with about 30 grams of carbohydrates or so. If the session is in higher intensity, zone 3 to 5, you're looking at, a moderate amount of carbohydrates. And anytime that the session is, say, longer than 2 hours, you're going to want to be consuming between 70 and 100 grams of carbohydrates before that session in order to prepare, in order to get your body ready, because you're going to need the fuel for that session. So during training, the idea and objective here is to keep your glycogen stores from running out, fuel that session, and maintain hydration throughout so that you're not ending the session dehydrated. Again, looking from left to right, if this is a lower intensity session, zone 1, 2, about every 40 to 60 minutes, you're looking at some kind of carbohydrate, protein, fat combination. So sports bars like Picky bars, Cliff bars, all packets of almond butter. Sometimes, if they're longer rides, athletes have done peanut butter jelly sandwiches they've made at home. They've packed, some have done trail mix. So whatever, this is more of my body has time to eat, chew, digest. I'm not going to have any race pace or race intensity session. These are those long 4, 5, 6 hour rides, or maybe longer, slower runs. If that intensity is higher, so zone 3, 5, you're looking to fuel every 15 to 30 minutes. And these are with those very easily digestible, fast carbohydrates. So gels, chews, sometimes sports drink mixes. We love Fuelin, we love Endurance Tap, the maple syrup. Excellent, perfect combination, that 1-to-1 ratio of fructose and glucose, the precision hydration gels, the Morton gels, which are on all of the Ironman courses. Side note, practice, even if you don't like it or don't intend on using it, have a couple practice sessions with whatever the race course is going to be providing, just so you know, if you lose your fuel or you need to grab something from an aid station, if you like it, how it works with your body, if you can tolerate it. And then choose, or some athletes use candy, whatever works for you. The idea is that quick, fast acting sugars. So using the appropriate fuel based on the session, aiming for 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates an hour, upwards of 120. And this is where carbohydrate testing, working on your gut, training your gut comes into play. If right now you stop and you realize, oh, I'm only consuming about 30, maybe 45 grams an hour, you don't want to jump right away up to that 90. You have to work your gut up to that. But shooting for that kind of minimum amount between the bike and the run is definitely the goal. And you want that mix. Anything above 60 grams of carbohydrates, so 0 to 60, glucose is fine. But once you hit that 60 mark, so as you're going to those higher 90 to 120 grams, you need a combination of glucose and fructose. We've done some posts on Instagram. It was last week. If you guys follow us or want to see there, where I explained kind of the difference between slow and fast acting carbohydrates and the combination to look for if you're going up to that 90 to 120 grams. In session, you also want to make sure you have electrolytes and water. Again, knowing your sweat rate is key here. And if it's an intense session, consider adding in caffeine. 200 milligram bolus, which means 200 milligrams of caffeine in one shot. A lot of gels don't have the caffeine in them in this 200 milligram amount. You'll see they'll have 80 milligrams, maybe 120 milligrams, but all of the research is done on, in the lab, athletes are given 200 milligrams in one bolus or one shot. And so that's why and how they felt that effect. Again, this is why it's important for you to know, do you respond to caffeine? How much caffeine do you need? If you frequently drink coffee and caffeine doesn't really affect you, then you might need to consider more. You might need to time that more frequently. If you never consume caffeine, or if you're someone that gets a headache, you don't want to all of a sudden on race day be consuming caffeine in large amounts. But definitely something to consider, especially in those afternoon sessions when energy levels might be dropping a bit. And if you haven't had a snack or any kind of a meal for a while, caffeine in those higher intensity sessions can come in handy. All right, now afterwards, I call this the glorious refueling, refeeding. Also on our Instagram, I just did a post about that post-training meal and is there that anabolic window. So be sure to check that out there. The goal after your training is to replenish glycogen stores, reduce cortisol, promote muscle repair and recovery, make sure you're rehydrating, and then preparing for the next session, whether that's later on in the day or the following day. Again, when you're trying to decide what to fuel with, you want to look at how long the session was, were you training for performance? What kind of intensity was there? And then your personal goals, body composition. Which is best done out of season, because in season, you really want to be focusing on performance. And then that's back to the Fuelin traffic light system, lower carbohydrates, moderate or high. And the idea or a way to kind of make it easy is know what about 30-ish grams of carbohydrates looks like at all of your meals. So for breakfast, for example, that might be one slice of toast with some almond butter and a banana. Then it's always easy to just add to that. So then maybe that 50 grams of carbohydrate could either be oats with some fruit on top. It could potentially be a big smoothie. And then that higher mark, that could be, protein pancakes. It could be a grain bowl or maybe an oat bowl with fruit and chia seeds and flax seeds. So know where kind of the baseline is, and then make it easy to add based on the duration and intensity of that session. Same thing with your dinners. You can see in the examples, vegetables were often, a lot of the times athletes will tell me, oh, I don't eat carbohydrates. And I say, you don't? Do you eat vegetables? They're definitely in smaller amounts, but there are carbohydrates in vegetables. So a nice big salad. And then adding to that, you can add maybe a grain like wild rice. And then as you can see in the higher carbohydrate example, there's some pasta with sausage and olives. So just different amounts of carbohydrates based on the type of session that you had and your body comp goals. All right, why carbohydrates? Just a reminder, in case anyone thinks that carbohydrates are evil, they are not. They are your body's preferred fuel source. They are rich in micronutrients. This is where you'll see a lot of your B vitamins, a lot of minerals, fiber. It's very important, especially for blood glucose control, for cholesterol, for overall body health. Carbohydrates, oats, quinoa, starches, all of those have vitamins and minerals and are important. And kind of the kicker, if you're not regularly consuming carbohydrates in or outside of training, your body gets much, much less efficient at actually utilizing those carbohydrates. So come race day, if you've been on a low carb diet all season, and you go to race and you're trying to take in gels, your body's not going to utilize those as efficiently and as quickly as it could if you had been consuming carbohydrates on a regular basis. Carbs help with the restoration of muscle and liver glycogen. They assist in fat metabolism, which a lot of athletes are like, oh my gosh, wait, it actually does help. It does. They're necessary for strength, force production, and for improved endurance capacity and performance. Carbohydrates are great for athletes. They're important. They should be an important part of your diet. They fuel, it's like why you should not be afraid of them. I think they're rocket ship. Some of my athletes that maybe are a little less keen on consuming higher amounts of carbohydrates, I try to remind them and kind of use this visual. Carbohydrates are fuel for the rocket ship. If you want to go hard and fast and long, you want some carbohydrates. They're energy. Energy is power. Power is speed. They are little gems in terms of performance, and being able to consume higher amounts of carbohydrates is trainable. It's just going to take some time. So definitely something to look at and prioritize in your training leading up to your race. All right, what does carb loading look like leading up to race? So race week, carbohydrate consumption. Is carb loading a thing? Yes, but not the way that we used to use it's not all of a sudden come race week consuming 400 grams, 500 grams of carbohydrates. It's also not dieting. So you want to race week, is ideally your training is slightly less. And so you're not burning as many calories. So while you're not significantly adding, you're adding enough that you are not cutting back on calories and kind of shifting the macronutrient focus around. So more of a focus on carbohydrates. It's not the time to cut calories. Increasing carbs to about 6 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. Females, some mixed research, 2 to 3 grams. Again, this is why it's important to know how your body responds to carbohydrates. How you do. I've had athletes that will go on the extreme end of carb loading and end up constipated or bloated because they haven't worked on that kind of all year long in races leading up to that. So again, jumping into consuming carbohydrates race week and then on the day of the race isn't ideal. You want to know how your body responds. And carbohydrates, a lot of times athletes will go, oh, well, I feel, I gained 2 pounds this week, or I feel a little full. And that's because carbohydrates carry water. So if you are potentially gaining a pound over race week, that's because that's extra added water weight, but that is to help with performance come race day. You won't hear me say this very often, but the day before your race, it is beneficial to reduce fiber intake in order to have that ease of digestion. You can definitely have some race morning in your, pre-race oats, but the day before is not the day to be doing heavy greens, juices, big salads, loaded plates of vegetables. Have that all the rest of the time, all the rest of the season. I highly recommend it. But the day before the race, you can dial that back a bit. Not a fun message, just throwing it out there. You can consider reducing alcohol intake while increasing hydration. So I always tell my athletes you are carrying around a bottle of either water or water with some electrolytes mixed in as you're traveling to your race, especially if you're flying. And then through Race Expo, as you're walking around getting your bike and all of your stuff checked in, as you're sitting in the hotel room or the Airbnb or your own house, if you're lucky enough to race at a local close place, you're staying hydrated all week, but especially in those couple days leading up to your race. And then if you kind of step back and look more at a global scale, combining kind of everything that we've talked about today in terms of gut training, knowing your sweat rate, carbohydrate rate, planning for your race day nutrition, starting at about 12 weeks back, that's when you can, 12 weeks from your race, start sweat testing, carbohydrate testing, gut training, and then beginning to plan your race nutrition for some of those brick sessions. Those are ideal because you get that bike to run kind of combo. And a lot of times athletes will do, they'll have the 100-mile ride as a longer ride, and they'll eat, bars and gels and any combination of food along the way. They might stop gas stations or whatever. And they think, okay, this is great, it's fine. But if they're not doing a run off the bike, potentially they don't know how their gut is going to respond. So brick sessions are a good opportunity for that. Again, now that you're about 6 weeks out, still practicing in those brick sessions, this is where you want to do that race setup. How are you carrying your bottles? How are you carrying your fuel? Are you going to be restocking? If you know your sweat and hydration rate and you need X amount of sodium, and that's in your bottles, and you can only carry 2 bottles, know the logistics, practice them so that, again, you don't have to worry about that on race day. Practice, like I said earlier, practice carb loading. to see how your body feels, how your body responds, what types of carbohydrates you're going to utilize for those. Practicing your race day breakfast type and timing. And then making sure you have the products, if you love the endurance tap gels or the precision hydration gels, ordering those, getting them all lined up, knowing, okay, I'm just throwing this out there. I'm going to need 10 gels for this, 2 packages of chews. I'm going to need, this amount of electrolyte mix, and having that ready. So that's one less thing for you to do and worry about. 2 weeks before, this is when, if you are going to be at a hot race, you want to look into that heat acclimation protocol and just finalizing all of the details. I'm sure you guys will go over your race day strategy with your coach. It's also the time to just go over one last time, what am I going to have the day before my race in terms of food? What am I going to have the morning of the race, during the race, and then after? You definitely want to, have that either recovery shake or something ready after your race, because you probably aren't going to feel like it. And this way, if you're taking something in to start that recovery process, and then afterwards you can obviously go get that meal, and then it's race day. So timing and looking at the calendar and kind of making that a priority. All right, key takeaways: high carb fueling, higher carbohydrates equals higher performance. It is what it is. Do not be scared of fueling in your sessions. Hopefully I've relayed the importance of properly fueling in your sessions, knowing that your gut is trainable, knowing that you can take your fueling up a notch or up a few notches if that's what you need in order to perform, but also not forgetting the importance of daily nutrition. The purpose, you're fueling for the work required, you're planning ahead. If your daily nutrition is, I would say, the foundation, just like your daily training. You wouldn't walk into a race without having done all of the work day by day. The same thing goes for your nutrition. That is the cornerstone, the foundation of you being a healthy athlete. That's knowing protein, carbohydrate requirements. That's making sure that on a consistent, regular basis, not only are you eating well, but that you're eating enough to fuel your body and to fuel recovery and performance. And that's where that planning ahead piece comes in. All right. Quick, just an intro to Fuelin. So we are the kind of only training-based nutrition program. So the idea is Fuelin syncs with Training Peaks, today's plan, Final Surge. So it syncs with your workouts and gives you personalized recommendations, training-specific recommendations for how you should be fueling every day, but also during your sessions. Takes away some of that decision paralysis of knowing, should this be a higher carbohydrate, a lower carbohydrate? How much protein should I have? It's a very easy traffic light system. Takes the guesswork out, and then you set the purpose. Are you working on body composition? Are you working on performance? Are you working on just creating consistent, healthy fueling habits? Are you trying to work on deficiencies that you found in blood work? So what nutrition becomes based on what your goals and priorities are. And then we use this data. You will be storing carbohydrate consumption, daily food consumption, sweat rate testing. And then we are giving you feedback in order to help. Every day, the app, every morning, the app has a check-in, which is great because it allows you to see, we ask, what's your motivation for training today? How was your sleep? Were you hungry yesterday? Are you sick? And that data is often missed in athletes. They're not taking the time. And it's, if we start to see a pattern, they've had a very low motivation to train all week. and they've also said they're tired. Okay, this athlete isn't fueling properly and they're not getting enough sleep, and this is why their workouts are suffering. And you can quickly, based off some of those patterns, start to notice in yourself where there are areas for improvement, or where you're nailing your nutrition and your sleep and your training. And you can say, yep, there's a definite correlation. And this is what I see with so many of the athletes that start working with us, is I see this correlation between fueling better or more even, and performance just kind of skyrocketing. They're like, I was under fueling before, or I was under consuming protein, or I definitely wasn't staying hydrated throughout the day, and I feel so much better. So the Fuelin system, very simple. Download the app, sync it with your training plan, do your training, eat, repeat. Mixed in there, tracking, obviously it tracks your macros, but tracking carbohydrate consumption and capacity, sweat rate, body rate, and then engaging with Scott and Alan and myself. We do weekly Q&As with our athletes. We have a Facebook group where, gosh, I love it. They post more than Scott and I do, and share ideas and recipes and comments and feedback. And, you know, athletes are encouraging. Athletes have met up at different races. So it really becomes not just a fueling system, but also kind of a fueling family, in my opinion. So this is an example in the app of what the carb capacity testing looks like. So you would do a session, let's say it's a 4-hour bike with some race pace intervals mixed in. After you completed that session, you would fill out, did you consume carbohydrates? Did you consume liquid carbohydrates? What types? How did you feel? Was there any GI discomfort? Specifically, which products you used? And then once you've entered that data, the time of day, the temperature, et cetera, you will get the grams of carbohydrates consumed per hour. And the nice thing about the app is that not only does it keep track of these, it is intuitive to then say, okay, this athlete is at about 50 grams of carbohydrates an hour. The future recommendations for training sessions will start working you up from towards 60, 80, 100 grams. And you can very quickly see where you're at in terms of carbohydrate consumption. And if you're at that, green is good if you're reaching that 90 to 120 grams of carbs an hour. And then same thing with the sweat rate testing. You will do a session. You will enter the temperature, the duration, what kind of session. You will weigh yourself before and after, fill out, did you have any GI complaints? Specifically, what products did you use? And then you'll be able to see fluid loss, sweat rate, and kind of dial it in from there based on training. Scott and I, if you need to sit down with us, we can help interpret some of this data as well. And just a picture, I think it's always helpful to see what the app actually looks like. So at the top, you'll see daily macronutrient targets. And as Fuelin syncs with MyFitnessPal, Lose It, Apple Health. So you can utilize those, or you can just enter manually into the app what you consume. We have suggested a breakfast. This athlete has a bike and a run. So we've, had a higher carbohydrate breakfast suggestion. Be sure to hydrate in session. In this bike session, it's green. As you can see kind of in the second shot, we are telling them what to consume, how to consume it, reminders to hydrate, how to fuel afterwards. The app has recipes to choose from that you can pick. And as you go through the day and enter your food in, it subtracts from those macronutrient totals so that you can see how you're doing throughout the day, how much you have left, and then looking at kind of patterns throughout the week to make sure you're meeting your needs. All right, I am going to stop sharing. That was a long time of me talking. long time. So it is your turn. Going to open it up to questions, comments, experiences, anything and everything. Yeah, don't be shy. Anyone is welcome. I covered a lot of stuff, so there's probably some questions. Or not.
I'll go first. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you. My throat is tired.
Just my one question, which I've been sort of trying to figure out, is there a way of consuming the right amount of carbs, and especially during training and racing, without taking in the sugar? No.
I'm guessing why you're asking that is because the idea, like sugar in general, is not something we want to be consuming on a regular basis.
And I sort of get tired. I feel sick from that sweet taste. So I know that you can get the carb mixes, just the natural carb powders that you can put into an electrolyte. But I mean, is it good? Is it sustainable? I don't know. It's something I've been thinking about.
Yeah. It's a great question. And my answer is yes and no. Yes, there are those carbohydrate mixes that, have no taste and you can kind of drink them down. The problem there is with the absorption and osmolality and like how that affects your gut. If a lot of athletes, maybe 2 hours or so, they're fine with those liquid carbohydrates, and then their gut starts to kind of rebel, which is why it's important to practice that. In terms of the sugars and like the gels and the chews, performance wise in training, you kind of need them. Now there are ways to work around it. So certain, in my opinion, and in a lot of athletes' opinions, certain gels are a lot sweeter than others. So the precision, which is why we talk about them all the time, I find the precision gels very unsweet, very easy to get down. It's a larger packet, but it's way less viscous, if you will. And the same thing with the Endurance Tap, kind of the maple syrup ones. It's easier, and like they have some ginger mixed in there, so it's a little less sweet. You can also put those gels in a bottle. Like if okay, I'm going to be consuming 10 gels, for example, you can squeeze those into your bottle and then mix it. I will add like some unsweetened black iced tea. Like I'll make that at home because it's very less. And then I combine that. And so it tones down the sugar of that. I've also, and this could be a, American thing in terms of, so there's a spice called tajin, like a Mexican spice that has like chili powder and cayenne pepper.
Yes.
So I will take my chews, the super sweet chews, and I will put them in a Ziploc baggie and sprinkle tajin in there.
Yes.
Because I don't like super sweet stuff. Like a little. So you could make your own mix. I think Element Hydration, they have a spicy mango powder. So you can add, I've added ginger powder to some of the higher sweeter tasting stuff. So there's ways, I think, to get around that. But yes, you absolutely do need those. Like you're not going to get the same performance benefit not consuming, white bread is great, but I'm not exactly sure how you're going to carry it, and then it's not going to have
and I'm not great for solids. I need liquid. So it's been something that I've been trying to. Okay, but I mean that's interesting.
Yeah, and you can
spices, salt.
I'm telling you, or squeeze a lot of I will get lemon and squeeze fresh lemon juice into a mix so that it's much less sweet. Lemon or lime juice is one.
Also. Brilliant.
Yeah,
That's helpful. Thanks, Elizabeth.
yes, absolutely. These little tricks you can utilize along the way.
Thanks.
Great.
Can I just clarify one thing with Jackie? Did we see you sipping on a gin and tonic as you were watching this presentation?
Oh, I wish it was soda water.
Just checking. Just checking.
For the record, I would love
If
it.
I had gin, I'd have like a big glass of gin.
If there was ever someone, to drink a gin and tonic during a talk, like my talk is the one. I don't mind. I love a good G&T. So I would not have been, and it's 7 p.m. It's the after work hour. I'm not going to say anything about it.
I have also 2-3 questions. So the first one, carb loading. How many days before the race ideally you would do that? Maybe you said that, but I missed it. Like 1 day or 3 days. I remember my first day I started like 2 weeks before. Like I was firing on carbs like 2, but I think that's too long.
It is about 5 days or so.
So the week of the race, basically.
The week of the race. Yep.
Okay. And what do you think about when it comes to carb loading as well, healthy carbs versus unhealthy carbs? I mean, I can go also for pizza and burgers, that's also carb loading. Huh?
It is. And when I'm like aging myself, but I was a collegiate swimmer, competitive swimmer all my life, and carb loading for us back in like the 90s was, just huge bowls of pasta. And like that was the idea of carb loading. And it's very different now. So carb loading now looks more like if you usually have, oatmeal for breakfast, for example, instead of, half a cup of dry oats, you're now having a full cup of dry oats. So it's not switching necessarily from oatmeal to donuts. It's like increasing the amount of of the stuff that you're already having. If at lunch, you make a grain bowl, it's including more grains in there. And yes, it could be going out on at the beginning side of the week for a burger and some fries, fine, not the night before. But if you want to, I tell people it's not adding in one meal and doing this huge amount of carbohydrates. It's maybe adding a recovery shake. A lot of the recovery shakes have, 40, 50 grams of carbohydrates in them. And so you can incorporate that in your daily plan somewhere, increasing the amount, whether if you used to just have, 2 frozen waffles with some almond butter, slice some bananas on top of that. And so really adding in a little bit at each meal, and then save the fries and the pizza and whatever for your post
after the race.
Yeah.
Great question. The final question. So I find it constantly challenging actually measuring the actual food, like gels and drinks. And so this is easy. This is very specific and you know exactly what you're consuming. But when it comes to rice, pasta, oats, etc., I don't know. I mean, I tried before MyFitnessPal. I found it also, I have to enter a lot of things manually. So I find it constantly challenging actually measuring, okay, how much should I eat at the end of the day?
So I too do not like I will take about 2 times a year or so. I'll take a week and I'll do the work and track everything. I'll use like a MyFitnessPal. I'll weigh it. I'll write it down just as like a check-in. But all the rest of the time, and I've done it long enough. I don't like to. So I recommend athletes kind of using the eyeball method. So protein, I tell them, is either the palm of your hand is a small serving, and then fingertip, hold it closer, fingertip to wrist is like a bigger serving. And that's where, the palm size is probably 25-ish grams of protein, depending on chicken, fish, ground beef, whatever. And then the fingertip to palm is closer to 40 grams. So utilizing that for protein. And then once, again, I've done it long enough, like visually, I kind of know what, like a half of a cup. So get out a half cup, a half measuring cup. That's usually like a 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrates. And whether it's a oats, a grain, a pasta, it's kind of, so I use like, you know, they tell you like the fist method. One fist is kind of one moderate serving of carbohydrates. And then fats, there are so many different kinds of fats. It's kind of like you need to know, okay, about a third of an avocado is kind of one serving of fat, 2 slices, 2 thin. I know, as someone that eats like avocado a day, it was a very rude awakening. A spoonful, a big heaping spoonful of a nut butter, peanut butter, almond butter. That's kind of, that's one serving. So I think eyeballing it visually, and then the other, I guess, clue I like to do, or kind of to know for myself, okay, I'm getting about what I need to, is I take my plate and 3/4 of it is like veggies, salad, like the green part of the plate. And then what's left is a combination of carbohydrates and protein. So visually, whether you do it as your plate or you kind of use the palm method, the fist method, something like that. And then if you do it, like, we're creatures of habit. A lot of us eat the same thing on a pretty, or at least Mondays are whatever, Tuesdays are tacos. And so we kind of have a system and a pattern. And if you do take a week or so to like measure and look at your food and go, oh yeah, I know this meal that I make with 2 eggs plus 2 egg whites, I've done it enough. I know that's about my, 35 grams of protein with 2 slices of toast. Like, you get some of your meals that are kind of your set meals that, those are the baseline. And then you can build or add on from there. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. It's easier to write a PhD most probably than measure all of this. Yeah. No, thank you.
It's important. And there are new apps. I was testing one out because we're trying to sync with some others, where you use your camera to like take a picture of your food and it enters it right in. And, I took a picture of an egg and it put it right in and got the protein. It can scan barcodes. So if not that all of our food should have a barcode, but a lot of them do. And it'll scan the barcode and it will read the nutrition information off the website. So things are getting better and getting easier. And then once you have kind of a system and your regulars, it's pretty, it can get a lot easier.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sure, great questions. A hand raised. This is great. All right, Cameron.
Yes. Hi, thanks a lot, Elizabeth. I had 2 questions.
Okay.
Sorry, the camera's not on. I'm driving.
That's fine.
So first question. First question was, so there's a fine balance when you've got some extra kilos and you want to lose those as well, and then you're like on not a high intensity training plan. There's a fine balance between like the nutrition and like trying to lose that extra weight. So how do you balance that? Is that like you first focus on the weight loss, and then what's your views on that? And the second question is about protein bars in general. What do you think of them?
Okay. First question, excellent question. Yes, we recommend choosing either the body composition or a performance focus. And if an athlete is looking to improve body composition, and it's not during, 20-hour-a-week training sessions, very intense, then yes, the body composition weight loss component takes priority. And what that looks like is really a shift in some of those macronutrients. So higher protein, slightly lower carbohydrates, being more specific, and adjusting kind of fat intake. You don't ever want to cut any of those out. It's just a matter of shifting. And so for athletes working on it, within the app, you can select body composition as your, training priority and goal. And then you can set kind of a weight loss parameter. Do you want moderate? Do you want aggressive? And again, talking with Scott or Alan or myself to help kind of judge how much time, like what that looks like. A lot of times for male athletes, it's easier to do that aggressive weight loss, whereas female athletes hormonally, we don't respond as well to that. And we often see a drop in sleep and performance. So we kind of go more of the moderate weight loss goal. And that's, again, off season and or if you're early in your season and session, training hasn't really ramped up. That's the time to focus on body composition. And it's quite doable. Just probably a shift in understanding what and when and how to eat, but prioritizing fueling before and after your sessions, prioritizing getting in enough protein in order to maintain that muscle mass. It's not just about drastically cutting calories. It's managing where and when those calories come in and what they come from. And then protein bars. I would say I like them as a tool for busy athletes that are trying to meet protein requirements. I don't like them as like a daily meal substitute. And I have had athletes that will eat like 3 or 4 protein bars a day because, they're like, I'm busy, I'm just trying to get in protein. And I try to counter that with real whole food is always better. Get added vitamins, minerals. It's more satiating to eat real food. But anyone that says they haven't been busy or had to go to a work meeting or had to travel, that's when protein bars come in handy. And that's when I would say if it's helpful in order to meet your macronutrient goals for the day, excellent. Don't use protein bars as an excuse to not eat well, if that makes sense. Like utilize them to help you meet your needs during transitions, during busy times, as snacks. I mean, I have athletes that are, PE teachers. And so they're out on the, physical education teachers, they're out on the field all day. They can't just sit and eat in the middle of the day. So they have a protein bar until they can, have that meal or whatever. So utilizing them within the context of a healthy diet. And when you're looking at protein bars, it's hard. So many of them have, I would say, added chemicals or ingredients that potentially might not be good for you. So the less, obviously, the less ingredients, the better. But then looking for protein that, if they use whey protein, for example, if they don't have a lot of added fillers, here in the States, we have RX bars. I like those. I think the protein they get is egg whites. So yeah, just being mindful. Some protein bars actually, are high in sugar, or they're just all fake food. Like if the list of ingredients is 72 things long, probably not the best choice for any food. The shorter the list, the better. But yeah, I think protein bars can help, especially for busy triathletes training twice a day. But I will say it's also, I feel like it's also very easy to hard boil some eggs or grab some jerky or some like protein sticks, or make some, I make turkey meatballs and snack on those, sliced deli meat, yogurts, like they make, you know, here we get those little to-go yogurts that kids love. They're like squeezable. I love those. Those are very easy and portable. So you have on the go options, but I'm not anti protein bar. Good questions.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
Just one question from my side.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. You.
Go for it. Go for it. It's fine.
In the old days, go back 20 years, you're doing marathon running or ultra marathons. We lived and died by 3-day carbo load. So you buy a whacking great tub of stuff and you spoon it down for 3 days, day in, day out. Is that just gone? Is that just considered now dumb?
Only if it's done like that. We still know the importance of adding or loading carbohydrates, but we no longer do it with like a concentrated carbohydrate mix or concentrated 2 or 3 meals. It's done over the course of the week, very systematically planned, if you will, just to help with digestion, to help kind of maintain energy and you know, carbohydrates, when you're consuming enough of them, can help with sleep. So it's really to help prepare you over the course of that week.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's not like cramming for a test. We don't want to throw that in the like 2 days before and just pray that, you know, our body responds.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi. So I just wanted to ask how, if you have like recommendations regarding taking in carbs in different weather conditions, because for example, I think recently it got really hot, but I noticed that it doesn't sit as well compared to when it's like normal temperature. Whereas I also think, for example, for me, I need more carbs when it's hot to be able to perform, but it's also not sitting as well.
Yeah. So first of all, I admire the fact and respect that you know you need more carbohydrates when it's hot. That's a lot of athletes don't have like the self-awareness to understand. So great job on knowing that. And also knowing, okay, this doesn't feel well. What potential things could I do instead? So many athletes will just be like, oh, GI issues are a part of the, you know, it just happens. And it's like, well, it doesn't have to happen. There's different options. So in the heat, I would say consuming less at more frequent intervals is easy. So imagine like drip feeding your carbohydrates versus like taking half of a gel or a full gel packet every, 30 minutes. I would say look at like 15-minute feeds. So potentially shortening that window, but just taking a little less. This is where I find that in the heat, I like chews better than gels. They just kind of, and some athletes have found that either it's the chewing sensation is easier, or the like consistency is sometimes a little easier to take down, and you're more likely to drink some water with that. And so adding in kind of some fluid as well can help. And then potentially switching to, adding in more liquid carbohydrates if that's easier, and keeping it cooler. So, it's easy in an indoor, if you're on the trainer inside, to have that like bottle in the refrigerator, keeping it cold. Cold fluids obviously go down easier. When you're outside, it's a little more difficult, which is where kind of those insulated bottles come in handy, or freezing your bottle and then letting it thaw kind of throughout the ride. And then I think too, potentially switching what it is that you're consuming. So obviously you want to train for what the race conditions are. So that's where kind of that GI discomfort, like your gut will, I don't want to use the word force it, but your gut will start to adapt. Even if you don't feel like it, you'll be like, okay, yes, my gut is getting used to these hotter conditions. but that's where I'll bring in like those little squeeze packets of baby food. Like I find that is easier for my gut on really, really hot sessions. And or like kind of chewing some food, whether it's, you know, like a bag of potato chips. If you're in on the trainer, it's a lot easier. So I would say liquid, potentially keeping it cool, or keeping an ice cold, like one of your bottles of hydration, keeping that very cold. Smaller serves more frequently, drip feeding your carbohydrates, and then potentially looking to switch up what it is that you're consuming. Mindful though of what race day is going to be, and knowing that you have to kind of practice that. Does that help a little, hopefully?
I will try. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Well, these were all, see, a lot of you were right. They're a great group. They ask great questions. A fun discussion.
Yeah, told you so.
Yeah, you did.
Thanks guys for coming. We're gonna send the recording, I think, anyway, if they wanted to look back. And
yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to Scott or myself. So I'm Elizabeth at fuelin.com. You can go, Lottie obviously can send messages. You can find us on Instagram. If you have any follow-up questions, send them on through. And yeah, I thank you for spending the time. I hope you guys have, you know, a great training and racing season. I hope there are good things ahead, and yeah, you picked up some key tips. If anything, we know carbohydrate loading throughout, importance of practicing your race day nutrition, finding solutions that work, and yeah, fueling before, during, and after, so that, yeah, so you guys can perform. All right. Enjoy your evening. I am going to start my Wednesday.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much.
Jesse, absolutely. It was great meeting you guys. We'll do another one of these, maybe on like hydration or heat acclimation or something like that as the season goes.
Just one question before we go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm just going through the sign-in process. Is there a coupon code for discount?
Yes. I will have Lottie send it out to you guys after.
Okay.
want to say as well, I know there's 3 different tiers for the package, just in case people are interested. Do you want to just kind of explain very briefly what each tier is and how involved that will be?
Yeah, thank you. I love the nutrition component of it. I forget the business side often. So the pilot level, the co-pilot level, and then the one-on-one coaching. The pilot level is very, it's kind of the least interaction in terms of direct contact with Scott and myself. This is more of like the independent, your training is entered. You are very self-sufficient. You don't need that kind of one-on-one accountability with a coach. You still get the same recommendations, all access to the app. You can chat with us. There's a chat feature in the app. But that's, you're really going kind of on your own. A lot of athletes that do the pilot will schedule, a monthly consult or something like that with Scott or myself as a check-in. The co-pilot level, again, is if you get some blood labs done, there's that intro kind of one-on-one call with either Scott or myself to kind of set goals for the season or while you're using the program. Again, the chat feature, and you get those weekly Q&A sessions with, Scott and I are on there live. We have one tonight, which again, I know probably timing wise doesn't work for you guys, but we offer them at different times for our athletes all over the world. And then the one-on-one is very direct, weekly chats, access with Scott or Alan or myself, very detailed planning. So there's always the ability within the app. If your training changes throughout the week, you can rerun your plan, you can make adjustments. But with the one-on-one level of coaching, Scott and I are in there changing, adjusting things based on our discussions every week, based on your goals. And there's always the option to start with one-on-one coaching and, you know, for a couple months to get things dialed in and then go back to the co-pilot or pilot level, or vice versa, start, get a feel for it, and then go up or have one-on-one consultations with Scott and myself. Thanks, Lottie. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will make sure to get you guys it's today. So you will have the discount code in your thing by tomorrow, tomorrow. And yeah, feel free to, jump in. Be fun to have you guys.
Thanks.
Sure. All right. Well, enjoy your evening. It was a pleasure. And great group. Have a wonderful season.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Sure.
Right.